irradiation industry is very nasty, and they continue to be a threat because they have joined up with the industrialized ag corporations who see irradiation really as a silver bullet for a lot of the problems that they're causing through the way that our food is produced. So irradiation destroys bacteria. Irradiation increases shelf life, so you can have old, dirty food. Irradiation also makes insects sterile, and that fits right into the scheme that a lot of the big food processors, the big agribusiness companies have, which is to offshore food production. They want to be able to produce food in places where labor is cheap, the environmental laws aren't as strong, and where there may be more bacteria and so forth because of poor sanitation. One of the ways that irradiation is done, it can be done with X-rays, a linear accelerator, or most cheaply by using radioactive isotopes or radioactive materials like cobalt-60, cesium-137. The real push for irradiation came during the Reagan administration, like a lot of the negative things that we're still fighting today. And Reagan appointed Margaret Heckler to Health and Human Services, which oversees the agency that oversees the Food and Drug Administration. And she had been a congresswoman who lived in the district where a lot of the Army research was done. She was a big proponent of irradiation and talked the Reagan administration into really supporting it. So magically, after all of these years where the Food and Drug Administration didn't support irradiation, after 1980, they began all of the legalizations. And many categories of food were legalized for irradiation between 1986 and 2000. There is a long track record of health problems associated with irradiated food. There have been 4 instances that we know of when there have been human subjects fed irradiated food. One of those was in India, and we've gotten to know the research scientist who did that work. In fact, she's been defunded and had to go into a different type of science because of the studies that she did. She's down at the University of Texas now studying cell phones, I think. But what she found was that the children who were fed chapatis, irradiated chapatis, very quickly had chromosomal damage, and they had to suspend the studies. Indira Gandhi had been interested in irradiation as a way to store wheat. And Dr. Vijay Laxmi, who did this work, has defended it very well. And amongst the other problems that we have seen in studies are cancer, death of embryos, fertility problems, mutations, chromosomal damage, tumors, premature death. And irradiation destroys many vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin K, B1. And so, in fact, one of the major problems that animals have in animal studies is deficiency, nutritional deficiency. So the Food and Drug Administration has been engaged in 2 processes that we're concerned about, and it's the reason that we've worked on this book and that we're releasing this book and doing a nationwide media campaign. First, they are considering taking away labeling altogether. There was a comment period at the Food and Drug Administration, and it's very hard to keep these government agencies accountable because they're not elected. So we worked hard last summer to get a lot of comments in. And the Food and Drug Administration hasn't acted yet. We believe that they may act to remove labeling before the Bush administration leaves office. they'll do a lot of nasty things their last month or so in office. And the other thing is, one of the last categories of food that hasn't been legalized for irradiation is processed food. So that's any food that has had its nature changed. So, you know, baby's applesauce, or things that have multiple foods in, like TV dinners. It's a huge category of food. So the book has a foreword by Jim Hightower, and this is what Jim says. He says that corporations, industry groups, and government agencies are perpetrating a 50-year-old public relations scam, telling Americans that irradiation is a miracle that can fundamentally change how food is grown, processed, and sold. Like the nuclear-powered car that would need 50 tons of lead shielding to keep passengers from being zapped to death, seriously, irradiation is an unrealistic science fiction gizmo dreamed up back in the atomic age. It's hard to find a more zealous bunch than the nuclear industry, which often turns deaf and blind to evidence threatening its naive, dogmatic belief in the omnipotence of radioactivity. As much as any other technology, irradiation has been pursued for all the wrong reasons. It is a supreme innovation of the post-industrial age. The Reagan administration wanted to use irradiation as a front to dispose of deadly radioactive waste left over from making nuclear bombs. The FDA, which once believed irradiated foods were unsafe, buckled under political pressure and legalized irradiated fruit and vegetables, beef, poultry, pork, eggs, shellfish, and spices. That happened with scant input from consumers, for that matter, from the food industry itself. As a result, lingering health and safety questions remain today. But we should always end on a note of hope. So I'll end with a quote from the chairperson of our board, Maud Barlow, who's an author and also chairperson of the Council of Canadians. And she says that the world is poised to make critical decisions about the kind of food systems we're going to pass on to our children and grandchildren. Are transnational corporations going to gain control of food production and use technologies like irradiation to increase their profitability? Are we going to allow family farmers from around the world to be driven from their land and replaced by factory farms? If we are silent and do nothing, this will be the course. But if we organize across borders and we educate and agitate, and if we refuse to be defeated, we can create a just and sustainable food system. And that's the truth.